Come on in. Okay, by way of review, and Phil and I are going to do this every class because the best way to learn anything is through repetition. Four main categories that Jesus is better than. What are they? Our first one, Jesus is better than what? We're going to study it tonight. Better than angels. Second, better than or greater than. He was a pretty big deal in the Old Testament. Moses. Better than the Levitical priesthood. And then last but not least, he was a better sacrifice. Okay, so those are, again, from a review perspective, those are the four big main overarching components of this book. The other thing that I want to point out is that we also, I'm not working here, Matt. There we go. Okay. And then chapter 8, verse 6. We have a new covenant that is built on what? Better what? Than the old? It is a better ministry, but it's on better promises. Okay? So, want to do our best to get this ingrained, because here's the thing. When we look and we talk about a book anywhere in the Bible, if we can understand kind of its structure, it's going to help us to remember what the book is about and help us when we start to study to kind of guide us to look for things maybe as our own personal study. Okay? And so angels, Moses, Levitical priesthood, better sacrifice, and it is a covenant that is built on better promises. Okay. So, and I actually watched myself don't ever do that. I watched our class and I was shocked at how many times I said okay, and so I'm going to try and stop that. I caught myself. Chapter 1. If I asked you what an overture is, who can tell me, for anybody here that's got any musical background, what is an overture? Anybody know what an overture is? Okay. It's a prelude to a larger body of work, and it gives a thematic background. Okay? When we look at verses 1 through 3, this is the overture of this book. We're going to start out in the first 3 verses, and right out of the gate, the author is going to set the tone for this entire book that we're going to look at. And it is a majestic piece of writing in just 3 verses. Okay? So if you've got your Bibles handy, we're going to flip over and we're going to read, and just because it's a large classroom here, I'm going to go ahead and read for us. Long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets. But in these last days, He has spoken to us by His Son, whom He appointed the heir of all things, through whom also He created the world. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of His nature. And He upholds the universe by the word of His power. After making purification for sins, He sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high, having become as much superior to angels as the name He has inherited is more excellent than theirs. Okay, so we discussed on Sunday we don't have an author, or we do have an author, but we don't know who his name. And I think one of the significant things, and I don't know if this is just pure irony or not, but when we look at it right out of the gate, Who's going to be doing the speaking? Okay, that's from the past. Who's going to be doing the speaking? God is, but through who? Through His Son. And so while we don't have, and you can see up there at the title, who needs an author when God is the speaker? Right out of the gate in this, we look here and we see that in the past, God spoke through who? through the prophets. What were the prophets? They were messengers. Spokesman might be another word. Okay, played a very prominent part, pivotal part. And yet, in these last days, God hasn't spoken to us, and by us I mean us. We fit in the same category as the recipients of this letter. He hasn't spoken to us through a spokesperson. He's actually spoken to us through His Son. And so obviously we see here that the emphasis is already starting to see that something is greater is now on the horizon. And so just like the attributes of one who is greater than others, they typically also have a better name. And in this case, by better name, what we're referring to here is the fact that He is called Son. Okay? And so when we start to look here at the first 3 verses, we've got 7 attributes that are pointed out. Now, I talked about this being the most Jewish of the New Testament books. What does the letter 7, or the number 7, represent? Perfection. Okay? And we're going to see this again in chapter 7. Again, irony or not, I don't know. What's the very first thing that's said about Him, about Jesus? He's what? He's an heir. Okay. What's the significance of that? Of the list, as we're going to start talking about here about Jesus, the very first thing that the author brings to the forefront is the fact that He's an heir. Why is that significant? Why is that the very first thing? Think about... Okay, it does show a relationship. Think about it, though, from the Jewish perspective. Authority, absolutely. Inheritance, okay? The heir in Old Testament, in the Old Testament, was extremely important. The eldest of the heirs got what? A double portion, okay? And so the fact that He's appointed heir of everything speaks to what these individuals are going to know. An heir is somebody that's extremely important, part of the family. It's somebody that's going to receive the entire lot of what the elder, in this case God, has. It's going to be theirs. Okay, so right out of the gate, He establishes something that is of preeminent importance to this audience here that is going to be reading this, that they would understand. What's our next thing? What's the very next title? Okay. One through whom the universe was made. Now, John chapter 1 in my opinion, is the only other New Testament book that compares to the majesty that is demonstrated here in these first 3 verses that talks about Jesus. Okay. Nothing was made that wasn't made through Him. John tells us over in the very first verse. Okay? And so, once again, who creates? God. So in essence, what he's saying there is that this one who things are made through is also God. Okay. He radiates the glory of God. Has anybody seen the glory of God? The true manifested glory of God, ever? No. Nobody on earth ever has, right? They were told that if they saw God that they would die. And yet, here the author tells us that He is the absolute perfect radiance of the glory of God. Okay? Now this is going to obviously speak to His character and who He is. The next one there is the perfect likeness of God's being. These two tie into each other. And I'm going to tell you why. If I asked you, what is somebody's character, what do you think? Pardon me? Okay, what is their demeanor? Okay. Think those are correct? Behavior, his character or her character, if we say something about it's who he or she is, right? If his character is exemplary, we know that speaks to the person that he is, the way that he leads his life. If her character is not good, we know that she might be a scoundrel, okay? And so that term likeness that we have in our Bibles, if your translation has that term likeness, the Greek word there is actually the word character. But instead of with an H, it's with a K. Charkter. Did I spell that right? Yeah. Okay? And the idea there is that it's a stamp. Okay? In the old days when the kings would do a letter, what did they put in the wax? The signet ring. Okay? And when somebody received that letter and they saw that stamp or that signet ring, who did they know that it was from? They knew it was from the king. Okay? Because it was the exact likeness of the ring that the king wore. And that's the idea here of this word likeness that is spoken of by our Lord. Okay? So that gets us through 4. What's our 5th one? Sustains what? Sustains the universe through his what? Through his power, or what does some of your other translations say? Word. Okay? How did our creation come into being? It was spoken. By the Word, it was created. By the Word, it is sustained. He does that. This individual who the author here is talking about. Okay. What's our 6th one? What has he done? Okay, made purification or cleansing for sins. And then our very last one, what has he done? Okay, he sat down at the right hand of God. When you think of that, what do you think? Was he just tired? Time to camp out? Tough road to hoe? My work's done? Is that what the author here is trying to convey? Keep it in context. Took his rightful place. It is also a sign of triumph. Okay? Here you have, before we get to this, 6 bullet points that show the absolute and utter divinity and majesty of the one who is being spoken about. There's nothing in here where you go, yeah, he's a pretty good guy. Or yeah, he did some pretty good things. The author here, right out of the gate, sets the tone through this overture. This is the Son of God who everything exists on. When we look at these 7 attributes here, this covers eternity to eternity. What do I mean by that? How is this eternity to eternity? Where was he before? He was in heaven. Where is he now? In heaven. If you look at the first 5 attributes on there, those were all that could have been done from heaven. Okay? He's the air. He made the universe. He radiates the glory. He's the perfect likeness. He sustains. That can all be done from heaven. What about the last 2? Where did they have to be done from? From here on earth. And so this encompasses everything about his character and who he is and what he has done. And so our Jewish brethren here would have known this. They would have seen from this, just from these 3 verses here, what the author was trying to do and show that this individual, who they have taken on a name through baptism, is truly God in the flesh. He is the Son of God. And there is absolutely nothing out there that is better than him. Okay? And so that's what we see coming right out of the gate. And so I know that's a lot of information packed into 3 small verses, but it really does, as I said before, kind of sets the stage for what we're going to see over the course of the next 13 chapters. Okay? Any questions or comments or anything? Yep, absolutely. Anything else? Okay. For the next 10 verses, I'm not going to read them because we're going to read them as we go through them. So, how many attributes are up on the screen? 7. We're getting ready to take a look at 7 verses that point out from the Old Testament that point out how Jesus is better than angels. Now, again, I don't know if that's just ironic. My opinion is that it's not. Again, just you're going to see these little things about how things like this would have stood out that are somewhat lost to us unless we really dig in and look. But that would have more than likely that they would have picked up on. So, okay. Big question. Why angels? I mean, why angels? Why compare Jesus to angels? Okay, they're heavenly beings. Okay. Darren? Mm-hmm. Yep. Talk a little bit about that here in just a minute on this slide. Okay. Pam? Why don't you just let her point it out? I'm sorry. What? I'm sorry. Yes. Satan was an angel. Absolutely. So our friends here would have had a rather extensive understanding of the role that angels had played throughout Old Testament times. In every single instance, when man was aware that they were standing in the presence of an angel, what is their reaction? Okay. Wanted to worship. That's absolutely correct. I think I heard some other over here. What was Pam? Okay. In every single instance, there is this dread, this fear, or this desire, as you pointed out, to want to worship, to fall down. Okay. There is no doubt that when man was confronted with this celestial being in front of them, they absolutely understood where they were in the pecking order. Okay? This wasn't a high five moment, good to see you, why don't you come over for some dinner? It was, oh man, is my life almost going to be required of me? And they were typically down on their face, on their knees, bowing. So clearly man understood the majesty or the majestic nature of angels. They are a celestial being. Okay? They are not like us. They pretty powerful? Now, some of you are going to know this verse I've pointed out up here. In one night, how many people can an angel kill? $185,000, okay? Hezekiah is praying to God. They're worried about the Assyrians are going to take him over. Sends an angel in one night, wipes out 185,000 people, one angel. They clearly understood from their Old Testament scriptures the power of an angel. Okay? So, from that perspective, why compare them to angels? Because the reality is, on the surface, the most powerful thing that men have seen close up have been angels. Yes, we have seen God in the Old Testament through scriptures, but they didn't have that face-to-face interaction with Him. They saw the mountain trembling. They saw the bush burning. They saw all these wonderful things, but when they were confronted face-to-face, eyeball to eyeball, the difference in the power was drastic. Okay? And so again, what we have to remember, all through this book, the author is trying to show everything that you think you know, and everything that you think is important, and everything that you think is significant about your past, you've got something better. And so that's what he is trying to do here. Okay? Theron, coming back to what you said. Paul tells us in Galatians that who delivered the old law? He was the intermediary by which it was brought to the people, but who delivered it to him? Who did it come from? And that's kind of hard to see. Galatians chapter 3. Why then the law? It was added because of transgression until the offspring should come to whom the promise has been made. And it was put in place through who? Through angels. Okay? And so the scripture tells us that it is angels who, and I'm just going to put this in my own language, act in some type of messenger capacity to bring the word to Moses. Okay? Makes perfect sense. Moses can't see God face to face or else he dies. And so he sends a messenger. Acts chapter 7 verse 53 says the same thing. Angels, and they didn't keep it. Again, pointing out that the law comes to them through the angels. As good Jews, they would have known this. Angels are a big deal. We also, when we look over in Colossians chapter 2 verse 18, Paul there, when he's talking about all these strange doctrines and following after and asceticism, he even points out that angels, in some regards, are worshipped. Okay? Now, they're vainly worshipped, but clearly man recognized where they stood in comparison to angels. Okay? And so when we look at this, while on the surface it might be, okay, Jesus compared to angels, yeah, we know he's so much greater, from their history and what they would have lived for a significant portion of their life, they would have probably had a greater understanding and appreciation maybe than we do so today from the times that we live in. Okay? So, now we're going to look at the 7 quotations. Any questions or comments before we get into that? Okay. Yes. And it's actually a point we're going to bring up. But, again, speculation here. If I just see Jesus, yes, he's great, and yes, he is wonderful, but if I just look at him as an elevated angel, I can still hold on to the tenets of the old law. Okay, that is a potential thing that they're looking at. Some of these things that we make assumptions on based upon what the text is, and just as you see kind of as a thought carries itself out, that is absolutely a possibility, and as I look through some of the commentaries, that was one of the things that they pointed out, that they could have been looking at him. And again, the author is going to show, no, we're not talking angels here. We're talking about a son. So, okay. Said it again. Hebrews 1:5. And let me put my specs on here. Okay, in 1:5, we actually have two different Old Testament references here. For to which of the angels did God ever say, You are my son, today I have begotten you. That's the first one. And then our second one, or again, I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. Okay, this is pulled from Psalm chapter 2, verse 7. Psalm chapter 2 is a royal psalm, and possibly, more than likely, this is speaking of the enthronement of David. We also see that this ultimate fulfillment here, when he says, you are my son, today I have begotten you, is ultimately played out, as is noted by Luke, Paul speaking, I believe it is, there when they are in Antioch of Pisidia, where he quotes this here, today you are my son, I have begotten you. Psalm chapter 2, verse 7. In the context, speaking of David, there's a word that is used in there that gives us a little bit of a head scratch. Which one up there in that first section causes challenges for our religious friends, and maybe even for us? Okay, I have begotten. And the reason why I said that this fully plays itself out as we get later, what does that term mean? Well, first and foremost, I beget Aiden. He's my son. He was born. Is that the same thing that we're talking about here? Do what, Pam? It actually does. Okay? Okay. Who? The royal psalm about who? The enthronement of who? David. He tells him in the context, today I have begotten you. Did God give birth to David on that day? I mean, this is simple biology. The answer is no. Okay? So then if we look at, and here's the thing about when we look at Old Testament, we've got to understand what the original context was. Yes, something can have duplicate meaning. Isaiah chapter 53, we all know that's a messianic passage. But when things are written in the Old Testament for people at that time, it had specific meaning for them at that time as well. Okay? They can have duplicate meanings. And in this case, when we look at this, today I have begotten you, the original context was of David. Same thing said about him, I have begotten you. How did he begot him? Or how did he beget him, I guess would be the correct English. What did he do? He established his what? His kingdom or his authority. Okay? And so while we have religious friends out there, and obviously I'm not here to bash, I'm just going to point out the Mormons are one that believe that actually Jesus is a created being from God the Father. Okay? And they go to this verse right here because it is referenced of David, but it is also referenced of Jesus in Hebrews and also in Acts. Okay? And so the thing that we have to do is when we come to situations or passages like this, we've got to kind of pull back the covers here and figure out what's really being said. Sometimes, as Peter said of Paul, some of the things that are written are hard to understand. Okay? Any questions about that? So, I'm going to jump ahead here. What does begotten mean? We're talking about authority, not biology. If there's one thing that we take away today, we're talking about authority, not biology, when Jesus is referenced as begotten. You put that one away, it'll serve you well in any conversations that you have moving forward. Second one. When he talks about here, and I wanted to point this out just in fairness, no angel has ever been called the Son of God. Now, in Job chapter 1, verse 6 and in 2:1, groups of angels were called the sons of God in context, but not in the same capacity that we see Jesus spoken of. And so that is critically important. 2 Samuel 7:14. This is the second part of this verse here in Hebrews 1:5. Again, this right here, or again, I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me of a son. Now, the original context there of 2 Samuel 7 verse 14 was spoken of Solomon. God here is speaking to David and telling him that he will establish his son. Now, the really, really, really cool thing that I think about this is that the author, when he pulls this verse out and says this, he completely understands that the son that he is referencing here in its truest sense was so much better than Solomon. Who does Jesus descend from? Whose throne does he sit on? Figuratively, David's throne. Matthew chapter 12, verse 42 points this out. Okay? And so, again, the symbolism here as we read into this is just absolutely incredible. What appears to be maybe somewhat of an obscure verse is pulled out here, and somebody who was, again, a significant pillar in Old Testament faith, both David and Solomon. The true fulfillment of this, I am called a son, was not to David's immediate son. It was the son that was going to come 1,000 years later. Okay? And again, these Jewish people, they're going to get this stuff a little bit better than us. Moving on. Hebrews 1:6. This is our third one. And again, when he brings the firstborn into the world, he says, let all God's angels worship him. Okay? Firstborn. What does that mean? Okay? Again, we're not talking about biology, we're talking about authority or superior rank. It's up here, so it's going to be an easy answer. David, here in this psalm, Psalm 89, this is spoken in the context about David. He is called the firstborn. Was David the oldest? No, he was the baby, right? And yet, inspired writers here call him the firstborn. Psalm 97:7, this same idea, let all angels worship him. Deuteronomy 32:43, I think it is, pulled from the Septuagint, is where this is referenced. Let all God's angels worship him. Did angels ever accept worship? I believe that you had pointed out that's what man wanted to do. What did they always say? No. You don't worship me. I'm a messenger. Okay? When he says there, let all God's angels worship him, when we read between the lines there, and maybe it's not so much between the lines, what is the author there saying? At the very base level, remember who we're talking about here, what's he saying? He's above all angels, but what is he? He's God. Only God is able to receive worship correctly, as the Scriptures tell us, over and over and over. And yet, not just man worship him, mind you. It's not just me. It's the other celestial beings, right? It's the ones that inhabit the sphere in which they live today. Let them fall down and worship. Yeah, I mean it's amazing. Again, one of the best things about teaching is that you really got to kind of dig in and study and learn. And so when Phil and I did this last time, even going back and preparing again for this quarter, it's just you'll probably hear me say it again, but this thing is like an onion, and you just peel these layers back, and the appreciation that you come to have for him. My biggest prayer for us is that when we finish in 13, and listen, it's not going to be because of me, and I think Phil would say the same. You're not going to come away with some this awe because of our teaching. But when we get in and we look at the text and what it says about him and who he really is, the appreciation that I have for Jesus doing an in-depth study here has gone up quite drastically. It doesn't change what I know about him, but my understanding of him and my relationship to him and just his magnificence, it has really, really gone up. And so, again, that's what this author is trying to do. He was doing it for the people here between 60 and 70 AD, and he's still doing it today in 2022. Okay. Next one, Hebrews 1:7. Of the angels, he says, he makes his angels winds and his ministers a flame of fire. Okay, this one comes from Psalm 104:4. And contrast the angels to what's being said about him. What are angels? At the end of the day, what are they? Okay. They're there to serve us. Now, I know we get a little bit uptight when Jesus said, when they tried to bring the children to him, and the disciples were trying to shoot him away, he said, no, let them come to me. Their angels sit before my Father's face. And I know that some of our other religious friends want to say, well, that's guardian angels. Here's what I know. Scripture points out multiple times that these incredibly powerful celestial beings are there to aid us. How does that happen? I don't know. I'll be the first to admit, I have no clue. But I don't have to know everything to know that God is helping us. He's there to let these beings assist us. Whatever that means. The book of Daniel is pretty neat because you see the angel coming and he's been all fighting. And so there's a lot of activity going on in the spiritual world that I believe contextually, when we see within the books today, that still go on, although that we can't see it. There is this war that is going on. And these right here, they're there to serve us. The other thing is that is important as it relates to the one that they're being compared to is, do they command? Do they command? No. What do they do? They convey, but they also obey. Right? That's the big thing. So whenever we're looking at angels, they're doing something on the behalf of God. Pam. Yes, that is correct. Again, a minister, a flame of fire, they serve all different kinds of capacities, but at the end of the day, in comparing them, they are servants. They are not the master. Okay. The wind, you said? Yes. Yep. Yeah, and if I remember correctly from some previous study, that whole idea of wind also speaks to spirit, and this nature, almost this godly nature. Again, the Holy Spirit falls into that same ultimate root word. So I think you're absolutely correct. Okay, when we look at Hebrews 1:8 through 12, here this speaks to the nature of his reign. You have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Therefore, God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness beyond your companions. The beginning of that, though, the interesting thing is that this is God speaking of the Son. Your throne, O God, is forever and ever. So here we have the Father telling the Son, you are God, your throne exists forever. This comes in the context from a royal Psalm 45. It's speaking about David's Davidic monarch and his reign. Again, the ultimate, though, fulfillment of this is not in David, who it's originally spoken of, but in his Son, Jesus. You, Lord, have laid the foundation of the earth in the beginning, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you will remain. Again, going back to our original 7 elements, speaks to the fact here God recognizes him as the Creator. Number 7, our very last one here. And to which of the angels has he ever said, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet? This comes to us from Psalm 110, again, a royal psalm. Do you see the thread that comes through here? Spoken of royalty originally, spoken of the true royal and all of these things. Where do angels sit? Better yet, where don't they sit? They don't sit at the right hand of God. That's where that seat is reserved for one individual. And he doesn't just sit there, he sits there in royalty. And as we talked about from the first slide of the 7, he is there in triumph. He sits reigning. The angels who he has been compared to are there to act as helpers. And they're there to minister and to serve who? Us who will inherit salvation. And so, when we sum all of this up, we've got 7 passages here that set out with the intention of demonstrating the absolute, unequivocal divinity of who Jesus is. The author quickly points out through this in few verses, contrast the difference between the sons of angels, and the 7 passages show that Christ is God, Creator, the firstborn, the Son worthy of worship, and he is not a minister unto man. Mike. I think that's actually really good. I need to write that down. Hey, don't forget that. I'll get that or text it to me. So, can we see why now on the surface? Maybe we set out, goes, why angels? That's kind of one of the questions. Now we see why. We understand how they would have viewed angels. And now the author is going to set the tone of them compared to what they do know from their past, what they have today. So, appreciate everybody's comments. Sunday, we will start in chapter 2. Bill will be teaching Sunday morning and Wednesday night. Anything? Bill has asked everybody to read Psalm 8. 8. Thanks, everybody.